My major recommendation for everyone, whatever you're doing, to slow down, to just slow down. Whether you're in a yoga class, whether you're in the gym, whether you're sitting in the office, whether you're walking up the hill, to slow down.
One is like squat. Like it's a basic human resting position. But how often do we squat? Since the introduction of all this table, chair, cushion, and bed, we have stopped sitting in the ground, and making connection with the ground is the other thing. Touching the ground, feeling it, going to the nature. So if you'll squat every day, it will take care of your lower body. Ankle, knees, hips, all the muscles in your lower body will be fit and perfect, and it will strengthen it. It will also help you from low back issues. The second thing for upper body is brachiating, hanging, finding something. Our shoulders are made for hanging, swinging, brachiating. But how often do we give that movement to ourselves? Never. Especially for the yogis out there, all the practitioners, there's no hanging or pulling movement in yoga. So please incorporate the hanging or pulling movement into your practice.
Hey Amit, hey Kayla.
Hi.
Welcome to the Avya podcast show. Where
Thank you,
every few days we bring someone who's very dedicated to their art, to their way of teaching, to the Avya podcast show, where we go deeper into what they really do and why they are doing it. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Happy to be here.
So, start with you, Amit. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Amit Meher. I'm from Uttarakhand. I've been practicing movement for last 6 years. My background is basically in yoga. I have pursued TTC, few short-term courses, 1 year of diploma, and then 2 years of masters. And I have been exploring different disciplines throughout this period of time, like hands-on animal movement, locomotion, flow work, spinal work, and trying different things this time. Yeah.
So, a total of how many years?
So it's been like, uh, if I count, it's more than 10 years. I have background in a little bit of weightlifting, and I used to go to gym. But since 2019, I have been practicing mindfully, like being aware what I'm doing. Otherwise, I was just doing anything, playing a lot of different sports since my childhood.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And Kayla, I believe you've been coming repeatedly to Rishikesh for the last 2 years.
Yes.
And I think you started initially with doing a yoga teacher training course.
Well, I started in India in 2018, and I was just randomly traveling. And it was then that I first got exposed to the real meaning behind yoga. And from there, I came back in 2019 to do my first TTC. And then I finished my studies in the States and in 2021 and finished my second TTC. And since then, in 2022, the timing, I've been in Rishikesh. Yes.
And have you done doctorate in the US or?
Yeah, so I got my bachelor's in exercise science, then I continued on to grad school to receive a doctorate in physiotherapy, and then I did a 1 year specialization in orthopedics, a residency program. So yeah, I was meant to continue my professional career in the US, but India has captured me and movement has captured me, and that's what I do now.
So the way I see it, you moved away from being a Western doctor. You moved into the world of yoga. You learned that. And from yoga, you've now moved to movement and anatomy. And so you came for yoga and now you're doing something else.
Hmm. It's not that much different in reality. Yeah, so I'm not teaching and practicing yoga asana, but what we do, it is still yoga. It's just a different way of approaching the body and the mind. More so in a physical, the physical look of it is a bit different, but the intentions, the focus, the mentality is very much similar to what is practiced and taught in yoga. Yeah. But yes, I've moved a bit of a different direction. Yeah.
And I mean, actually, this is to both of y'all. You're in a place like Rishikesh. Rishikesh is known as the yoga capital of the world. in the yoga capital, what you're saying is that movement is the next yoga. And so it's quite a bit of a, to be in, someone may even say that it's a bit cheeky, that people are coming here for yoga and you're teaching them movement. So,
So there are high chances of people who are in yoga for certain period of age and in attempt of trying something new and experiencing something new. I have seen a lot of people, there are a lot of examples who have dived into a movement world and now they are practicing movement, but they are teaching yoga only. And but for their self practice, they are exploring different disciplines from the movement culture. So, and personally, me also, like I have little background in yoga. I have pursued few courses and practice asana, pranayam, mudra, bandhan, all these things from yoga. I still carry all those principles from yoga, but I like to try different things, and I really personally love being a beginner in new discipline and challenging myself, like how a new discipline can challenge you in multiple of ways. That's something which has really influenced me from the movement culture. Let's say I have never done an animal movement, I'm just doing asanas. But as soon as your hand touches the ground and you come into this contralateral movement, the way your body moves, it's very different and beautiful experience. So I believe like people should experience different disciplines from the movement culture and decide for themselves that if they want to dive deeper into the movement world or just stick with their yoga practice.
and Kayla, because of your physiotherapy background and your knowledge of yoga and now movement, how do you say that, just from a physiotherapy, what you understand about the body, that the way movement approaches this science, that how do you feel towards these movement practices as against yoga,
Yeah.
the traditional asana yoga?
Well, that's what really changed my direction with how I approach my offering, because for many years I really had the intention of bringing physio and yoga together. And there is yoga therapy, that is something out there that exists, but in my personal journey and the teachings I received in Rishikesh and in India, I felt some resistance in myself as to how much I could really use asana for someone who has wrist pain, for someone who has back pain, for someone who has knee issue, because so much of asana, it's so full body, and when you can't do one thing from one joint, it really changes the whole sequence. And so as I started to explore movement, it really opened up my perception of how we can utilize different pieces of different disciplines to tailor something for an individual. So I still use yoga asana. Of course, asana is good for the back, it's good for wrists, it's good for everything in the body. But to take specific pieces in combination with animal movement, in combination with some martial art forms, some practices you see in Kalari Payet, we've got all of these disciplines from all over the world, and we can just take little bits and pieces that are the most relevant to someone in their specific injury. That's really how my offering has evolved, and it's evolved through the influence of this movement culture, because that's what movement is. Movement is everything. It encompasses everything, and I find that when I can really just pick the different pieces that I feel is most applicable, I can actually tailor something and create something that's going to be very specifically relevant to the person I'm working with. So I feel like it can be a lot more therapeutic in nature, and it's also not about aiming for something to look a certain way, at least from my perception. A lot of yoga asana, it's about getting into a certain alignment, getting into a certain position of the body, and when we get more explorative, we can start to be more individualized in what we're doing and how we're moving.
I see, I mean, like in asanas for someone who's not very flexible, like for example, me, who cannot even touch his feet after several years of yoga. And yeah, I can understand that it's limiting to a certain way, because if you cannot do part A, sometimes you cannot do part B of the asana. And in that case, you think movement is better?
Well, yoga is movement. So
Okay.
so I wouldn't say movement is better because movement is the same as yoga. It's more so we are incorporating a different approach, right? Our objective is not to get into a specific asana. It's we maybe take movements from asana sequences, but the goal is different. And when you change the intention, it changes the practice. So it depends on the intention of the practitioner. Like if someone who has some injury, if their goal is to do some asana sequence, then that's what we're going to work with. We take some elements of other movements to tailor the approach, but ultimately that is the goal, right? But does that answer your question?
It does answer the question very well, actually. Thank you. To which some of the benefits of yoga in the traditional asana form is it has a lot of spiritual component. One goes deeper into the asanas. It's about holding still. It's about breathing in a particular way once one gets into the asana. Maybe focusing on certain parts of the body, certain chakras, when one is doing that asana. I don't know how movement would be able to incorporate some of these things, and your thoughts on that.
Mine or yours?
Okay, I'll answer this question. So, spiritual journey, you associated yoga with spirituality. Of course, there is a spiritual element in yoga practice, but I believe that no matter what discipline, let's say you are practicing martial art, there is a spiritual component in martial art as well, like the dedication, your respect towards the discipline itself, how you're performing it, and what purpose that discipline is serving you. It itself becomes a spiritual, like for few people, like for me, like this movement culture, movement practices have changed me inside out. It has transformed my life. So I consider it as my spiritual journey as well. Okay.
Yeah, and also I think, yes, there's a beauty in working with the same, like if you're in martial arts, to go deeper and deeper into martial arts. But I think, what we're trying to get across is it's not so much about getting deeper into a specific practice, but about getting deeper into the self, right? Because when you start to pull from different disciplines, you're going to start to learn new aspects of yourself, new aspects of your commitment, your drive, your push, your desire, your goals, your sensation, your muscles, your weaknesses, your strengths. And like for me, it's crazy as I've worked with Amit, because obviously Amit can do a lot of stuff that I'm not able to do. But in the process of learning from him, I've started to uncover strengths in my body that I had no idea, where I can flip it through this bridge type movement. I'm like, I didn't know I could do that, So, it's not so much about, for me, at least from my perspective, like the movement culture and all of this that we're talking about. The real goal, and I think the real goal of everything, it's not about going deep into the spirituality of yoga. It's about going deeper and deeper into yourself, because ultimately it's all the same, right? It's all the same if we really get into that level of, yeah.
Yeah, we all are spiritual beings, like no matter what discipline you're pursuing, whether it's yoga or any other form.
So the deeper we connect to ourselves, the deeper that is our spirituality. So we just utilize the variations of movement from all different genres to do the same thing. Yeah.
About just yoga asanas, the last question on this part. Yoga asanas, their sequences have been built over generations, some say over thousands of years. And movement as a practice is probably more recent. And just, is there scientific evidence? Is there any thoughts about how movement as is being done against the traditional asana form, which could be any thoughts? I mean, why, and are there any scientific?
So, yeah, there's a beauty in yoga asanas, all the sequences. I'll not say all the sequences, but sun salutation is, I it's a like a hate and love relationship. For me personally with sun salutation, I used to love them a lot, and then I started like completely avoiding them. Now I'm pursuing Kalari Payat, and he make us do sun salutation. Now when I was not doing sun salutation, then I realized once I started sun salutation that how much beauty it holds, like you're moving in all range of motion and everything. Your spine is moving from flexion to extension. You're working on your wrist, shoulder, spine, hip. So there's beauty in sun salutation, like I said. But if you go for a Stanga primary series, intermediate series, secondary series, all this advanced series and all, you're repeating the same movement over and again and again and again, which can cause like overuse injury. So you will find like a lot of Ashtanga teachers and practitioners themselves with a lot of wrist, shoulder, and like hamstring pull is very common these days, and especially for the practitioners who are practicing primary series, because there's a lot of forward bending into it, and when you do forward bending continuously over and over and again, it can lead to like hamstring pull and other injuries like that. So that's why your practice should be more functional. Like the main ultimate goal of any practice or any discipline you're pursuing is you should enjoy your body without any pain and discomfort and injury. I'm not saying that if you pursue any other discipline you'll not have injury, but it's not that repetitive movement. When you follow the same sequence, it will develop the awareness. You can see your progress over and over again when you repeat the same sequence compared from day 1 to day 30 or next month, but you're using the same muscle groups. So it becomes very repetitive and monotonous, and it binds you in a certain way. Its movement practice is not limited to a yoga mat. You can practice, your body is your tool, and you can move it anywhere, everywhere, wherever you go, you can practice. But yoga practitioners, they need yoga mat, and it constructs you in a certain way, and it is monotonous. That's what I personally believe, and can have a risk of injury.
I think also, like, to answer your question about the research wise, the support behind a movement practice, I'll say this first. So when I first started working with Amit 2 years ago, there were certain movements he would show me, and I would say, oh, I use that in the clinic. Oh, I use that with patients. Oh, I use that. Like, I've seen these movements before, but only in very specific scenarios when someone is coming who have an injury. So what we do is we're teaching these therapeutic techniques, these ways of building up the strength and dexterity of your joints and muscle systems and everything without someone having an injury. So ultimately, we're building up the body to be stronger and more resilient to prevent injury, pain, dysfunction. And there is a lot of research to support a lot of the movements that we use through our movement practice, right? And the thing is that, like Amit said, when you're moving in the same pattern, in the same way with your practice in the gym, like if you're just doing squats, you're just doing bench press, that's not functional, right? That's working in the single plane range of motion. When we have injuries in our body, it's usually when we twist, we rotate, we push in like a sudden, fast movement, right? So when we're doing this with our movement practice and when we're teaching the principles of this movement, everything is to put the body through these types of movements that generally would cause injury, but with the intention of building, of strengthening into those different movement patterns.
Progressive.
Yeah, with progressive overloading, which is a principle you don't see in yoga asana. There's a lot of incredible movements in asana, and we love to utilize those, but you're not going to get into like this sudden rotational movement in your knee, right? And when you're holding into a, right? So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. Another thing I was wondering about was in traditional yoga, breathing has a very important part. And certain places you do the Ujjayi breath, there's certain pranayam that one may do at the end of a session. And those breathing aspects of yoga have tremendous benefits. And when you teach, what role does breathing have within that? And how do you approach the breath as a part of your movement teaching?
yeah, breath work is a huge part of what we bring in. And I want to say something, but I'm going to let Amit speak mostly to this because we were just having a conversation with one of our students who finished a TTC last month, and she was told by her pranayama teacher that if you're not seated in stillness, it is not pranayama. That true pranayama is only when you're in a seated, still position. Amit had an interesting response to that, and I don't actually know like what the exact definition of pranayama is, but I would say just as everything is, our approach is to make everything more functional. So we do a lot of breath work with movements of our arms, movements of the trunk, a lot of incorporation of the spine, especially a lot of different ways of breathing with the different rotation and just a lot of different things to really bring the breath and the movement together, which is ultimately the intention of yoga asana, but we just kind of bring in a few different practices that you wouldn't generally see. Yeah.
So in all of our session, you'll find that we include the breath with the movement, like she said, and we do spatial breathing, like spinal breathing, sectional breathing, focusing on, and maybe it's a part of we are picking from the yoga world only, but we incorporate our breathing practices through the movement, and we do intentional breathing in our sessions. It's not just yoga which talks about pranayama, but if you'll see other disciplines like tai chi, qigong, they're also focusing on it's different. They're yoga, they're like Eastern yoga, you can say, like a Chinese martial art or everything. Every practice has very important role of breathing in it. So, like I gave the example of Tai Chi and Qigong, they do specific breathing. Like all the movements, even if you're walking, we do meditative walking. We incorporate a lot of breathing into it so that people can become more aware about their day-to-day activities, like simple act of walking. How you can incorporate mindfulness and breathing into just walking. You can make everything meditative, and you can become more aware about your being, your presence. So ideally, what I'm saying is the breath is very important, and we incorporate the breath work or pranayama, you can say it, in our movement sessions.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's an amazing answer. Thank you. Kayla, you've been teaching the students anatomy during these sessions, and could you highlight? I mean, I understand you're a physiotherapist, and your understanding of anatomy would be deep. But why do you feel that it needs to be a part of these sessions?
Wow. I could talk about this for the whole podcast. But to put it shortly, I say this often. I say, some of our students come in and they want to know the science. They want to know the names of muscles and everything like that, which I love working with those students, of course. I want to teach people the anatomy, but ultimately, I want to teach people understanding of the body. And I find that when there's a visual with some understanding associated, when you start to move, you can connect to that area of your body so much more easily. So much more easily. So often you get cues, a lot in yoga, but also in a lot of disciplines. Oh, you should be rotating this way, you should be moving this way, like these muscles should be active. And when you don't actually know what's there, how can you really truly engage that area of your body, right? So yes, one, for engagement, but also just awareness and connection. The more you can see and understand what is where, you can feel certain areas of your body so much more. And we see it time and time again as our students bring that science, the knowledge of the body into the physical practice, the clicks, the connection. Oh, wow, that's what that is? Especially for these small muscles, it's like in the shoulder, the rotator cuff muscles, the deep stabilizing muscles in the shoulder, in the hips. As we start to connect to those things, as we start to see it on a screen with some understanding and some connection, okay, that's where this muscle is, that's where this muscle is, you start to feel, you start to sense, and you start to develop a deeper relationship to that part of your body. You have more ownership of your movement, more understanding of your movement, and it changes how you respond to sensory signals of the body, whether it's pain or just something that's different. You start to have a deeper understanding of, okay, I should change this movement. It's a whole way that I approach therapy and healing. Is the more you connect to your body, the more you understand what your body needs, and you respond accordingly, and you take ownership of your healing. And so I just use the knowledge of anatomy as a tool to just go deeper. Like I said, our whole thing is going deeper into the self. So using the science, the tangible researched things that we know are there, using that as a medium to just go deeper into what's happening.
And let's now go a little bit more into the viewers who are watching this episode. If you are going to teach them 2 or 3 things, or what they could easily, like what I've seen over the last year or 2, as I've seen you teach people, is you talk to people a lot about how people should walk or how people should sit, and maybe certain things which you could talk to the audience about. There's these few simple things, and they could immediately start seeing some benefits in their life.
I will, just to feed off of what I was already just saying, my major recommendation for everyone, whatever you're doing, to slow down, to just slow down. Whether you're in a yoga class, whether you're in the gym, whether you're sitting in the office, whether you're walking up the hill, to slow down and just start to pay attention. Start to slow down your movement. See what's happening. Just start to observe. We move, we walk, we feel every day with no awareness. We live in our minds, we don't live in our bodies. So just taking some intentional time every day, every time you're practicing, for at least a few minutes, to just be aware. Get out of your head and just feel the different areas of your body. That would be a general arching encouragement I have for whoever listens to this podcast, is to just take some time to slow down your movement, slow down your mind, and just feel. And then we have, of course, some specific practices that we encourage also. Amit, you can
Yeah,
do that.
I want to add few practices which I always emphasize and ask everyone to incorporate in their life and in their practice. One is squat. It's a basic human resting position. But how often do we squat? Since the introduction of all this table, chair, cushion, and bed, we have stopped sitting in the ground, and making connection with the ground is the other thing. Touching the ground, feeling it, going to the nature. So if you'll squat every day, it will take care of your lower body. Ankle, knees, hips, all the muscles in your lower body will be fit and perfect, and it will strengthen it. It will also help you from low back issues. The second thing for upper body is brachiating, hanging, finding something. Our shoulders are made for hanging, swinging, brachiating. But how often do we give that movement to ourselves? Never. Especially for the yogis out there, all the practitioners, there's no hanging or pulling movement in yoga. So please incorporate the hanging or pulling movement in your practice.
What do you mean by the pulling movement?
There's no pulling movement. If you hang, there's always pushing. You're always on the ground, you're pushing, but you're never pulling yourself up. So what happens is your pushing muscles becomes very active, while your pulling muscles becomes inactive. And so if you incorporate, or anyone will incorporate, little hanging or pulling movement in their personal life, it will balance out pushing and pulling.
It's also a huge benefit for really the whole body, but especially the wrists, the shoulders. If you have any wrist issue, it's going to help open up the joints. Any shoulder issues, it helps with the distraction, pulling sensation in the shoulders, really opening up the joint. The spine elongates, especially when we're sitting all the time. There's so much compression. Gravity is just pushing down on our spine. So when you hang, everything can decompress and lengthen. So hanging is just such a good practice for anyone and everyone. It can be at a gym, in a playground. It can be on the edge of a stair, depending on the staircase.
Finding a door case.
It can be on a door.
Anything, branch in the tree.
If you have a pull-up bar, of course.
That's best.
But this is literally just hanging. It's not doing even a pull-up.
Not
It's
pull up,
literally just
no chin up, nothing.
holding and just letting your body hang and
Decompress.
Yeah.
Heal.
They say you're as old as your spine, right?
That you are.
And hanging decompresses the spine and
Yeah,
therefore opens up the space.
The third one is spine. So first one, lower body squat, upper body hanging. Third one is like just spinal movements. We have 6 movements, give 6 movements to the spine. Forward bend, back bend, side bend to the right. Twisting to the left, twisting to the right. If you're giving this 6 movements on daily basis, your spine will love you. Yeah.
And you will be as young as your spine.
As your spine is.
Moving away from movement and yoga and taking it to a lighter note. So, you were involved in many things out here in Rishikesh. You started by becoming the most famous dancer of Rishikesh in the Uttarakhand style of dance.
I can dance like any Pahadi, yeah.
Yes. And then we saw your talents in helping design the interiors at Avia.
Yes.
And so you're a multi-talented woman.
Didn't know it, but I guess so, yeah.
So
What's your point?
What's your life in Rishikesh going to be more? Is it going to be future more movement or designing architecture?
I had my few months of fame as an interior designer, and I am not gonna go back. one time thing. I did enjoy it thoroughly, but no, my plans are movement. I want to share what we do with as many people as possible. We have our online platform, and I really want to make some international influence because what we're teaching is the body, and it's important for every single person. And it doesn't have to be like a structured asana class that you go to every day. It can be really implemented into day-to-day activities, just being more mindful, being more intentional, having a few movements that you make sure you do every day. Like there's just so many barriers, I think, to people developing better relationships to their bodies. A lot of people think like, I have to go to the gym, I have to go to this class, I have to have someone else tell me what to do. And my goal is to empower people to realize and to see that the greatest teacher is right here. It's just right here. Yeah.
I've subscribed to your Instagram channel. I see that you
Have you?
Yes. I'm one of those who's helped you maintain your lead over me, over Avia. And so anyone who's watching this, do subscribe to Avia in big numbers and be subscribed from Amit and Kayla's channel. No, but jokes apart, I see that you have a lot of small snippets of how people could use movement in their daily lives. So what's the inspiration? I mean, I'm sure it's continuing from what you just mentioned, but if you could just tell a little bit more about what you're planning to do with Instagram and how the content out there is structured.
Yeah, we have a lot we want to do with Instagram. Yeah, it's a big passion project for both of us, especially me. A lot of my energy that went into interior design is now going into Instagram. So sorry, Ashish. But no, we just want to keep sharing as much as we can. It's when we're teaching in session, I just wish we could take snippets through from the whole session because they're just little gems that we like could really shift the way someone does things, you know? So our reach is we want to, of course, work with people who are already connected to their body, help them go deeper into their practice. But I think ultimately,
movement is for everyone.
Yeah, for me, I wanna get the people who don't do anything. I want to get the people who go home from 9-to-5 jobs, sit, watch TV, and start it over the next day. I want to help get to them and help them see like how incredible this is and how much better they would feel if they just started to shift that lifestyle. Like, yeah, at least, yeah.
I mean, from practical experience, one can, be absolutely certain that the mind cannot feel good if the body is not feeling good. It's really very, very linked.
And we as a society are like movement deprived, so our body is meant for moving, but we are not giving that movement to it. Our body actually craves for the movement, but we are so disconnected with its demands still we are distracted with all those life and everyday activities. But once we get little exposure to our body of the movement and how good it feels, it will crave for it. So I'll always emphasize talking about movement as a snack. Just like we crave for like fast food in a day, if you give a right taste to your body of the movement or any discipline, just moving and enjoying its potential and its freedom, your body will crave for it, and be you'll be like so happy.
Wanting to do more.
Yeah, want to
Yeah.
do more. It's kind of addiction, you know. Once you get the taste of it,
We've
you
seen
want it more.
We've
you
seen
want
it with
more.
people when we share like different practices with them, and they feel their shoulder blades in a way they've never understood ever. You know, and it's like, whoa, that's there, and it's like, yeah, it is. And then it's like this little fire. It starts. And all of a sudden, like this curiosity, like, oh wow, I can feel that, I can understand that, you know. So I think ultimately, like, our Instagram is educational. It's like we're sharing practices, we're sharing anatomy, but ultimately, I want it to reach people to spark their interest, to spark their own creativity at exploring their bodies and helping them see like there's so much that you can access, you know. And I think that's ultimately what we both want to do.
Lovely. Thank you so much for being a part of this podcast and
Welcome.
talking to the audience about movement. And I think we've been sitting on our asses for too long, and let's get up and
Let's
start
get
moving.
moving!
Let's get
Get moving.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you.
It is an honor. Yeah.